It all began with a fleeting sense of unease that gradually morphed into a full-blown crisis. My name is Michael, and I've been married to Emily for 7 years. We've built a life together in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone waves and kids play in the streets until dusk. From the outside, we seemed like the perfect couple. I had a stable job as a software engineer, and Emily worked part-time as an interior designer while taking care of our 2 young children, Olivia and Ethan. Our relationship had always been one of trust and mutual respect. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always managed to work through them. Or at least, that's what I thought. Emily and I met in college, and our connection was instantaneous. She was vibrant, full of life, and had this infectious laugh that could light up a room. I fell head over heels for her, and soon enough, we were inseparable. Over the years, our lives settled into a comfortable routine. We both had demanding careers, but we made time for each other and the kids. Our weekends were filled with family outings, barbecues with friends, and the occasional date night to keep the spark alive. But looking back, I realize now that there were subtle signs, tiny cracks in the facade that I either ignored or dismissed as normal relationship wear and tear. It started with Emily's sudden interest in her appearance. She began working out more, dressing up even when we were just staying home, and spending an unusual amount of time on her phone. I chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself, which I fully supported. I mean, who doesn't want their partner to look and feel their best? Then there were the late-night phone calls and texts. Emily would step out of the room to take them, always with the excuse of it being a work call or a friend in need. Again, I didn't think much of it. She was a caring person, always there for her friends, and I trusted her completely. But trust, I learned, can be a double-edged sword. It can blind you to the truth that's staring you right in the face. My first real moment of suspicion came when I noticed her brother Jason visiting more frequently. Jason and Emily were close, always had been. They shared a bond that was unique, partly due to their tumultuous childhood. Their parents had divorced when they were young, and they had leaned on each other for support. I admired their closeness, never once thinking it could be anything but sibling love. Jason was a charming guy, the life of any party, and always had a good joke to share. He was single, having gone through a rough breakup a few years back, and spent a lot of time at our place to escape his own lonely apartment. The kids adored him, and he often babysat when Emily and I needed a night out. He was part of the family. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Emily and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. Jason had been over earlier, and as usual, he and Emily had spent a lot of time chatting and laughing in the kitchen. I remember feeling a pang of jealousy, which was odd. I never felt jealous of their relationship before, but that night, something felt different. Emily was more animated, more engaged with Jason than she had been with me in weeks. "Is everything okay?" I asked her during a quiet moment in the film. She looked at me, a bit startled, and gave me a reassuring smile. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" she replied. But her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, slowly but surely. Over the next few weeks, I started to notice more odd behavior. Emily's phone was always on silent, and she never left it unattended. She had become secretive, closing her laptop when I entered the room and quickly changing the subject if I asked about her day. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to take the kids to the park to give Emily some time to relax. When we returned, I found her and Jason in the backyard, their heads close together, whispering. They jumped apart when they saw us, and Emily's face flushed a deep red. "Hey guys, what are you two up to?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light and casual. "Oh, nothing," Emily said quickly. "Just talking about some family stuff." Jason gave me a half-hearted smile and excused himself, saying he had to get going. I watched him leave, a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. That night, after the kids were asleep, I confronted Emily. "Is there something going on between you and Jason?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. She looked at me with wide eyes, a mixture of surprise and hurt. "What? No, of course not. How could you even think that?" I felt a pang of guilt for doubting her, but something in her tone didn't sit right with me. "It's just, you two seem really close lately, more than usual." "Michael has my brother," she said, exasperated. "We've always been close. You're imagining things." I wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. So, I pushed the doubts aside and tried to focus on our family. But the unease remained, lurking in the back of my mind, waiting for the moment when everything would come crashing down. Little did I know, that moment was closer than I could have ever imagined. The next few weeks were a haze of routine and suppressed suspicion. I did my best to act normal, but the nagging feeling of something being terribly wrong gnawed at me constantly. Emily's behavior didn't change much, which only added to my unease. The late-night calls continued, and her secretive demeanor persisted. I tried to shake it off, but it was like an itch I couldn't scratch. One fateful evening, everything came to a head. It was a Friday, and I decided to work from home to spend more time with the kids. Emily seemed a bit flustered when I told her, but she brushed it off, saying she was just stressed about a big project she was working on. Jason had been over the night before, and their usual animated conversations had taken place while I busied myself with chores. The day passed uneventfully until late afternoon. The kids were playing in the backyard, and I was in the living room catching up on some emails. Emily had disappeared upstairs an hour earlier, saying she needed to take a shower and relax for a bit. I thought nothing of it until I heard a strange noise coming from our bedroom. At first, I dismissed it as the sounds of Emily moving around, maybe dropping something or bumping into furniture. But then I heard it again, a muffled thump followed by a low, guttural moan. My heart skipped a beat. It was an unmistakable sound, one I hadn't heard in a long time. Emily's voice, but filled with a passion that had been absent from our bedroom for months. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. Could it really be what I thought it was? My hands shook as I made my way to the staircase, each step feeling like an eternity. The noises grew louder, more distinct, confirming my worst fears. I reached the top of the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears, and approached our bedroom door, which was ajar. Peering through the small gap, my world shattered into a million pieces. There, on our bed was Emily, completely naked and in the throes of passion. But it wasn't just the sight of her that destroyed me. It was who she was with. Jason, equally naked and intimately intertwined with my wife, was moving in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. A wave of rage and betrayal surged through me, and without thinking, I kicked the door open. The sudden noise startled them both, and they scrambled to separate, but it was too late. The image was seared into my mind, and nothing could erase it. "What the fuck is going on here?" I yelled, my voice cracking with a mix of fury and heartbreak. Emily's face turned ashen, and she pulled the sheets around her, her eyes wide with panic. Jason, equally shocked, fumbled for his clothes, his face flushed with a combination of guilt and fear. "Michael, I can explain!" Emily stammered, but I cut her off, my rage boiling over. "Explain? You think you can explain this?" I gestured wildly at the bed, at the scene that had just played out before my eyes. "You're fucking your own brother, Emily! How could you do this to me? To us!" Jason tried to speak, but I wasn't interested in anything he had to say. I lunged at him, shoving him hard against the wall. "You piece of shit! You come into my home, pretend to be family, and this is how you repay me?" He didn't fight back, just stood there, looking as broken as I felt. "I'm sorry, Mike," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen." "Well, it did!" I shouted, releasing him and turning my attention back to Emily. "Why Emily? Why him?" Tears streamed down her face, but my sympathy was gone. "I don't know, Michael. It just happened. We were both feeling lost, and it just happened." "That's not good enough!" I roared. "You betrayed me in the worst possible way. How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. "A few months," she finally admitted, her voice shaking. "A few months?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been screwing your brother behind my back for months?" The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt my knees weaken. I had to sit down, the room spinning around me. "I can't believe this," I muttered to myself. "I can't fucking believe this." Emily tried to approach me, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't. Just don't. I can't even look at you right now." Jason had managed to get dressed and stood awkwardly by the door, clearly unsure of what to do. "Get out," I said coldly. "Get the hell out of my house and don't ever come back." He looked at Emily, who nodded, her face a mask of sorrow. "Go, Jason," she whispered. "Just go." As he left, I felt an overwhelming urge to punch something, to release the anger that was threatening to consume me. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to process the nightmare my life had become. Emily stood in front of me, her face a mix of regret and desperation. "Michael, please. We need to talk about this." "Talk?" I scoffed, finally looking up at her. "What is there to talk about? You fucked your brother, Emily. You destroyed our marriage, our family. What more is there to say?" She sobbed, clutching the sheets around her like a lifeline. "I know I hurt you. I know I made a terrible mistake, but please, we can get through this. We can fix this." I shook my head, the pain too raw, too overwhelming. "I don't know if we can, Emily. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had committed the ultimate act of treachery with her own brother. It was a wound that might never heal, a scar that would forever mar the fabric of our lives. And in that moment, as I sat there in the wreckage of our relationship, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The hours that followed were a blur of emotional upheaval and painful realizations. Emily's pleas for forgiveness echoed in my ears, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. The images of her and Jason together replayed in my mind like a sickening loop, and I couldn't escape the torment. That night, I slept in the guest room, or at least I tried to. Sleep was elusive, my thoughts racing, unable to find any semblance of peace. Emily stayed in our bedroom, and the house was eerily silent, save for the occasional muffled sobs coming from her side of the hallway. I felt like a stranger in my own home, the foundation of my life crumbling beneath me. The next morning, I awoke with a heavy heart and a throbbing headache. The kids, thankfully, were still asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within their parents. I needed to confront Emily, to get answers, to understand why and how this had happened. But most of all, I needed to release the pent-up anger and hurt that was consuming me from the inside. I found Emily in the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy from a night of crying. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and hope, as if clinging to the possibility that we could somehow salvage what was left of our marriage. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "Yeah, we need to talk," I said, my tone colder than I intended. "But first, I need you to tell me everything. The truth. No more lies, no more half-truths. I want to know everything." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "I owe you that much." We sat down at the kitchen table, the tension between us palpable. Emily fidgeted with her hands, struggling to find the right words. "It started about 6 months ago," she said finally. "Jason was going through a rough time, and I was feeling disconnected from you. We were both vulnerable, and one night, we just crossed a line." I clenched my fists, the anger boiling within me. "Crossed a line? You fucked your brother, Emily. That's more than just crossing a line." She flinched at my harsh words, but continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's disgusting and wrong. I don't even know how it happened. We were drunk, we were both lonely, and it just happened." "Did you ever think about stopping? About what it would do to me? To our family?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Of course I did!" she cried, her tears flowing freely now. "Every single time I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop." We couldn't stop. It was like we were caught in this twisted, destructive cycle, and I didn't know how to get out. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "So what? You just kept going, hoping I would never find out? Did you think you could keep this secret forever?" "No," she sobbed. "I knew it would come out eventually. I knew it would destroy everything. But I was too weak, too scared to face the consequences. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant to hurt you like this." Her apologies did little to soothe the raging storm inside me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly shattered. "Sorry isn't good enough, Emily," I said through gritted teeth. "You've torn our lives apart. How do you expect me to ever trust you again?" She looked at me with desperation in her eyes. I don't know. I don't know if you can, but I want to try. I want to make things right." Please, Michael. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. I love you. I love our family. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, but it did little to quell my anger. Love? You call this love? You've destroyed everything we built together. How can you stand there and talk about love? I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice breaking. But I can't lose you, Michael. I can't lose our family. Please, just give me a chance to make things right. I stared at her, the woman I had loved and trusted for so many years, now a stranger in my eyes. I don't know if I can, Emily, I said finally. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had committed the ultimate act of treachery with her own brother. It was a wound that might never heal, a scar that would forever mar the fabric of our lives. In that moment, I made a decision. You need to leave, I said, my voice cold and resolute. I can't have you here right now. I need time to think, to process all of this. Emily's eyes widened in shock. Michael, please, don't do this. Let me stay. Let me prove to you that we can work through this. But I shook my head, the pain too raw, too overwhelming. No, Emily, you need to go. I can't be around you right now. Pack a bag and leave. I'll take care of the kids. She looked at me, her eyes filled with sorrow and regret. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. But please, Michael, don't shut me out completely. We need to talk, to figure out what happens next. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what the future held for us. Just go, Emily. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. As she walked out the door, a part of me wanted to chase after her, to hold her and tell her that everything would be okay. But the pain of her betrayal was too great, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, taking care of the kids and trying to keep my emotions in check. They sensed that something was wrong, but I did my best to reassure them that everything would be fine. It was a lie, of course, but I couldn't bear to see them hurt. As night fell and the house grew quiet, I sat alone in the living room, my mind racing with thoughts of Emily and Jason. The anger and hurt surged within me, and I knew that I couldn't just sit here and let them get away with what they had done. I needed to do something to take control of the situation. And that's when the idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind. The idea of revenge simmered in my mind, growing more potent with each passing hour. The pain of betrayal gnawed at me, and the need for some form of retribution was overwhelming. Emily and Jason had shattered my life, and I couldn't just sit idly by and let them walk away unscathed. They needed to feel the depth of my hurt, to understand the consequences of their actions. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be pretty, but I was beyond caring. The righteous anger burning within me demanded satisfaction. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of whiskey, hoping it would steady my nerves. As the liquid burned its way down my throat, I resolved to see this through. The next morning, I called in sick at work, telling them I needed a few days to deal with a family emergency. It wasn't a lie, but the emergency was of a different nature than anyone would have guessed. My mind was already working on the specifics of my plan. Emily had been staying with a friend, and I knew she would be eager to talk, to try to mend things. But that wasn't going to happen. Not yet, at least. First, I needed to gather information. I went through Emily's phone records, something I had never done before. It felt invasive, but I needed to understand the extent of her betrayal. I found numerous calls and messages between her and Jason, some of which made my blood boil. Their affair had been more intense and more frequent than I had imagined. Armed with this information, I decided to confront Jason first. He was the catalyst, the one who had invaded my home and my life. I needed to make him understand the gravity of what he had done. I drove to his apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The thought of what I was about to do both terrified and exhilarated me. When I arrived, I took a moment to compose myself before knocking on his door. Jason opened it, his expression a mix of surprise and apprehension. "Mike," he said, his voice strained. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, my tone cold and unyielding. "Let me in." He hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let me in. His apartment was a mess. a reflection of his disordered life. I could see the guilt and fear in his eyes as he motioned for me to sit down, but I remained standing. "There's nothing to talk about, Jason," I said, my voice shaking with controlled rage. "You fucked my wife. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jason lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. "I know, Mike. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen." "Sorry?" I spat, taking a step closer to him. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You destroyed my family. You took everything from me." He looked up, his eyes filled with remorse. "I know, and I can't take it back. But it wasn't just me. Emily. Don't you dare try to put this on her," I interrupted, my fury rising. "I know she's to blame too, but you're supposed to be her brother. How could you do this?" Jason took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I don't have an excuse, Mike. We were both in a bad place, and it just happened. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "There's no making this right, Jason. But there is something you can do." He looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Anything, Mike. Just tell me." I leaned in closer, my voice low and menacing. "You're going to disappear. Leave town, cut off all contact with Emily, and never come back. If I ever see you again, I swear to God I will make your life a living hell." Jason's face went pale and he nodded slowly. "Okay, Mike, I'll go. I don't want to cause any more pain." "Good," I said, stepping back. "You have 24 hours to get out of here. Don't make me come looking for you." I turned and walked out, leaving Jason standing there, a broken man. It felt like a small victory, but it was only the beginning. The next step was dealing with Emily. I knew she would be harder to break, but I was determined to make her feel the full weight of her actions. When I returned home, I called Emily and told her to come over. She sounded relieved, probably thinking I was ready to talk things through. But my intentions were far from conciliatory. I needed her to understand the depth of my pain and the consequences of her betrayal. Emily arrived a short while later, looking anxious and hopeful. "Michael, thank you for agreeing to talk," she said as she stepped inside. "Sit down," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "We have a lot to discuss." She sat at the kitchen table, wringing her hands nervously. "I've been thinking about everything, and I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for. But I want to try. I want to fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, my anger bubbling to the surface. "How do you propose we fix this, Emily? By pretending it never happened? By sweeping it under the rug and moving on like nothing's wrong?" "No," she said, her voice trembling. "I know we can't do that. But we can go to counseling, work through our issues. I love you, Michael. I don't want to lose you." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Love? You call this love? You slept with your brother Emily. You destroyed our marriage. Do you have any idea how sick and twisted that is?" She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I know it's horrible. But I was lost, Michael. We were both lost. And Jason, he was there when I needed someone." "You had me," I said, my voice breaking. "You always had me. But you chose him. You chose to betray me in the worst possible way." Emily sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I don't know what to say. I can't take it back. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right." I leaned forward, my eyes boring into hers. "You think you can make this right? You think you can fix this with words and promises? No, Emily, this is beyond repair. But there is something you can do." She looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes. "Anything, Michael. Just tell me." I took a deep breath, the rage and hurt consuming me. "You're going to pack your things and leave. I don't want to see you, hear from you, or have anything to do with you. If you ever come near me or the kids again, I will make sure you regret it." Her face crumpled and she sobbed uncontrollably. "Please, Michael, don't do this. I love you. I love our family. We can work through this." But my heart was hardened, the pain too great to forgive. "No, Emily, you made your choice. Now live with the consequences." She nodded, defeated, and slowly stood up. "I'll go," she whispered. "But please, let me say goodbye to the kids." I hesitated, torn between my anger and the love I still felt for the woman who had betrayed me. Fine, I said finally. But make it quick, and don't you dare try to fill their heads with lies. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face as she went to say goodbye to Olivia and Ethan. I watched from a distance, my heart aching as I saw the pain in their innocent eyes. They didn't understand why their mother was leaving, and I didn't have the strength to explain it to them. After she left, the house felt emptier than ever. The silence was deafening, and the weight of what had happened pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. I had gotten my revenge, but it felt hollow, leaving me with a gnawing emptiness that refused to go away. As the days passed, I struggled to find a sense of normalcy. I threw myself into work, trying to keep my mind occupied, but the memories of that night haunted me relentlessly. The kids sensed the tension, and I did my best to shield them from the worst of it. But the reality was that our lives had been irrevocably changed, and there was no going back. The anger and hurt still simmered within me, but I knew that revenge had only brought temporary relief. The real challenge was learning to live with the pain, to find a way to move forward. And as I looked at my children, I knew I had to find the strength to do it, for them, if not for myself. The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars of betrayal would never fully heal. But I was determined to rebuild my life, to find a way to rise above the wreckage and create a new future for myself and my children. The days following Emily's departure were an emotional roller coaster. I felt a mix of relief, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. The house seemed emptier, and the silence was deafening. The kids noticed the change, and their innocent questions about where Mommy was only added to my heartache. Olivia, who was 7, had the most questions. "Where's Mommy, Daddy?" she asked one evening as I was tucking her into bed. "Mommy had to go away for a little while," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But she loves you very much, and she'll be back to see you soon." "Did you and Mommy have a fight?" she asked, her big eyes filled with concern. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes, sweetheart, we had a fight. But sometimes grown-ups need time apart to figure things out." She seemed to accept this explanation, though I could tell she was still worried. I kissed her goodnight and left her room, my heart heavy with the weight of the situation. Ethan, who was only 4, seemed to take it all in stride, but I knew he sensed the tension too. Each day was a struggle to keep things together for the kids. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, keeping to our routines as best as I could. I cooked their favorite meals, played games with them, and read them bedtime stories. But the pain of Emily's betrayal was a constant shadow, lurking in the background of every moment. Nights were the hardest. Once the kids were asleep, the house was too quiet, and my thoughts would race. I replayed the events over and over in my mind, torturing myself with the details. The images of Emily and Jason together haunted me, and the hurt felt as fresh as it had on that first day. I found myself alternating between fits of rage and bouts of uncontrollable sadness. The rage was all-consuming, a burning fire that made me want to break things, to scream at the injustice of it all. But the sadness was even worse, a deep, hollow ache that made it hard to breathe. I missed Emily, despite everything. I missed the life we had, the dreams we shared, and knowing that it was all gone, shattered beyond repair, was almost too much to bear. One particularly rough night, after tossing and turning for hours, I decided to get up and go for a drive. The streets were empty, and the cool night air helped clear my mind. I drove aimlessly, trying to make sense of my emotions, but finding no easy answers. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a small bar on the outskirts of town. I hadn't been much of a drinker, but tonight, I needed something to dull the pain. I walked into the bar, ordered a whiskey, and found a quiet corner to sit in. The bar was nearly empty, just a few other lost souls seeking solace in the bottom of a glass. As I sipped my drink, I thought about everything that had happened, and the enormity of it all hit me once again. The bartender, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, noticed my distress and came over. "You okay, hun?" she asked, her voice gentle. I shook my head, unable to find the words to explain. "Just going through a rough patch," I said finally. She nodded, understanding. "Heartache's a bitch," she said, pouring me another drink. "But it gets easier, I promise." I wanted to believe her, but the pain felt insurmountable. We talked for a while, and though she didn't pry, Her presence was comforting. I left the bar feeling a little lighter, though the ache was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work and taking care of the kids. I reached out to a therapist, knowing that I needed help to navigate the turmoil I was in. The therapist, Dr. Anderson, was a kind and empathetic man who listened without judgment. Our sessions became a lifeline for me, a place where I could unload the heavy burden I was carrying. "You're dealing with a lot of pain and betrayal," Dr. Anderson said during one session. "It's natural to feel the way you do, but you need to give yourself time to heal. This isn't something you can rush." "I just don't know how to move forward," I admitted. "Every time I think about it, it feels like a fresh wound." He nodded. "It's going to take time, Michael, but you will move forward. Focus on the things that bring you joy, like your kids. Lean on your support system. And remember, it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling." His words were a balm to my wounded soul, and I clung to them in the darkest moments. I started to find small moments of peace and joy, especially when I was with Olivia and Ethan. Their laughter and innocence were a reminder that life could still have beauty, even in the midst of such pain. Emily reached out a few times, wanting to talk, but I wasn't ready. Her texts and calls went unanswered, and I knew she was struggling too. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to understand her side of the story, but the wound was too fresh. I couldn't face her yet, not without reopening the gaping chasm of hurt. One evening, as I was putting the kids to bed, Olivia looked up at me with her big, earnest eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to be okay?" Her question pierced my heart, and I struggled to find the right words. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "But I promise that no matter what happens, we will always love you and Ethan, and we'll always be here for you." She nodded, seeming to understand more than her 7 years should allow. "I love you, Daddy," she said, hugging me tightly. "I love you too, Olivia," I whispered, holding her close. "More than anything." As I sat in the quiet of the house that night, I thought about the future. The path ahead was uncertain, and the pain of Emily's betrayal would take a long time to heal. But I knew I had to keep going, for the sake of my children and for myself. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I leaned on friends and family for support, and I started to find solace in small, everyday moments. The laughter of my children, the warmth of the sun on my face, the simple pleasure of a good cup of coffee. These little things became my anchors, grounding me as I navigated the stormy waters of my emotions. There were still dark days when the weight of everything felt unbearable. But I held on to the hope that things would get better, that I would find a way to heal and move forward. And with each passing day, the pain became a little less acute, the anger a little less consuming. The journey was far from over, but I was taking the first steps. And in those moments of clarity, I realized that while Emily's betrayal had shattered my world, it hadn't destroyed me. I was still here, still standing, and I would find a way to build a new life from the pieces that remained. And so, I took it one day at a time, focusing on the things that mattered most: my children, my own well-being, and the hope for a brighter future. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to walk it, no matter how long it took. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. The kids adjusted to the new normal, and I found moments of peace amidst the chaos. But despite the progress I was making, there was still a conversation that needed to happen, one that I had been avoiding. Emily had reached out several times, each message a plea for a chance to talk. She had respected my request for space, but I knew we couldn't avoid each other forever. There were things that needed to be said, questions that needed answers, and a path forward that needed to be determined, whether it led to reconciliation or permanent separation. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone in the living room staring at the phone. Emily's latest message was simple. "Please, Michael, we need to talk, for us and for the kids." I knew she was right. It was time. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice hesitant. "Michael?" "Emily," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "We need to talk. Can you come over tomorrow evening?" "Of course," she replied, relief evident in her voice. "I'll be there." The next day was a whirlwind of nerves and anticipation. I wasn't sure what to expect from our conversation, but I knew it would be intense. As evening approached, I prepared myself mentally for the confrontation. The kids were spending the night at a friend's house, so we had the privacy we needed. Emily arrived right on time, looking both nervous and hopeful. I could see the toll the past months had taken on her. She looked thinner, her eyes haunted. She walked into the house slowly, as if she was stepping onto sacred ground. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," she said softly, standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Let's sit down," I said, motioning to the living room. We sat opposite each other, the distance between us feeling both vast and insurmountable. "Michael, I know I've said this 1,000 times, but I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Why Emily?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why him? Why your brother?" She took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't have a good answer, Michael. Jason and I have always been close, and we were both going through a tough time. It was a terrible mistake, one that I regret every single day. But it wasn't because I stopped loving you. I was lost, and he was there." "That doesn't make it any easier to understand," I said, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You betrayed me in the worst way possible. How can I ever trust you again?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me easily, but I want to try to make things right. For us. For the kids. I still love you, Michael. I always have." "Love?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign and hollow. "How can you talk about love after what you've done?" "Because it's the truth," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed your trust. But my feelings for you never changed. I was confused and made terrible choices, but I never stopped loving you." I looked at her, searching for any sign of deceit. But all I saw was a broken woman who was genuinely remorseful. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Emily," I said quietly. "The pain is too deep." "I understand," she whispered. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm committed to making this work. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. I want to rebuild our trust brick by brick, if you'll let me." The sincerity in her voice tugged at my heartstrings, but the anger and hurt were still there, refusing to be silenced. "What about Jason?" I asked, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. "I've cut all ties with him," she said quickly. "He left town just like you asked. We haven't spoken since that night." Her words brought a small measure of relief, but it wasn't enough to erase the betrayal. "And the kids?" I asked, my voice softening. "What do we tell them?" "We tell them the truth, in a way that's appropriate for their age," she said. "That we had a fight and needed time apart, but we're working on it. They deserve honesty, but they don't need to know the details." I nodded, knowing she was right. The kids had already been through enough, and they didn't need the burden of our mistakes. "I don't know, Emily," I said finally, my voice heavy with emotion. "I don't know if I can move past this, but for the sake of our children, I'm willing to try." Her eyes lit up with hope, and she reached across the table to take my hand. "Thank you, Michael. That's all I ask for. A chance to make things right." I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze her hand back either. The road ahead was uncertain, and the wounds were still raw. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a small, flickering light in the darkness. We talked late into the night, discussing everything from our feelings to practical matters like living arrangements and therapy. Emily moved back into the house, but we kept separate bedrooms. It was a delicate balance, trying to rebuild our relationship while giving each other the space we needed to heal. Counseling sessions began the following week. At first, they were excruciating, forcing us to confront the pain and betrayal head-on. There were tears, raised voices, and moments of profound silence. But slowly, bit by bit, we began to peel back the layers of hurt and start the process of healing. The therapist, Dr. Collins, was patient and understanding, guiding us through the minefield of emotions with a steady hand. "Rebuilding trust is a long and difficult journey," he told us during one session. It's not about forgetting the past, but about finding a way to move forward together. Emily was committed, doing everything she could to show me that she was sincere. She was transparent about her actions, her feelings, and her whereabouts. She attended individual therapy sessions, worked on herself, and showed up for our sessions together with a determination that both impressed and moved me. But trust was not something that could be easily restored. There were still moments of doubt, flashes of anger, and nights where the memories of her betrayal kept me awake. Yet amidst the pain, there were also moments of connection, small, tentative steps towards rebuilding the bond we once shared. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The air was cool, and the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. "Do you think we can ever get back to where we were?" Emily asked softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't think we can ever go back to exactly how things were, but maybe we can build something new, something stronger." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'd like that." The journey was far from over, and the scars of betrayal would always be there. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of possibility, a chance to create a new life from the shattered pieces of the old one. As we sat there side by side, I realized that healing was a choice we would have to make every day. It would take time, effort, and a willingness to confront the pain and work through it together. But for the sake of our children and the love that still lingered between us, I was willing to try. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was a journey we would undertake together, one step at a time. And with each step, I hoped we would find a way to move forward, to heal, and to build a new future, one filled with honesty, commitment, and the hard-earned strength of a love that had been tested but not broken. Rebuilding our lives from the ashes of betrayal was a daunting task, but it was one we faced together. The weeks turned into months, and each day brought its own set of challenges and victories. Our progress was neither linear nor easy, but it was real, and slowly we began to find a new rhythm. Emily and I continued our therapy sessions with Dr. Collins. He helped us navigate the complex emotions and rebuild our communication. We worked on being honest and transparent with each other, which was crucial for restoring trust. Emily's efforts to show her commitment were unwavering, and I found myself slowly, cautiously, beginning to believe in the possibility of a future together. The kids sensed the change. Olivia and Ethan seemed happier, more secure as Emily and I started to co-parent more effectively. We made a point to spend quality time as a family, creating new memories to replace the painful ones. Weekend outings, movie nights, and simple everyday moments became the foundation of our healing process. One of the most challenging aspects was dealing with the fallout from our friends and family. The news of Emily's affair had spread, and there were many awkward conversations and strained relationships to navigate. Some people judged harshly, while others offered their support and understanding. We leaned on those who stood by us, finding strength in their unwavering belief in our ability to overcome this crisis. Emily's relationship with her family, particularly with her parents, was deeply affected. They were devastated by the revelation of her affair with Jason, and it took time for them to come to terms with it. Family gatherings were initially tense, but as Emily and I showed our commitment to working through our issues, their support grew stronger. Jason's departure had left a void in the family, and the pain of his betrayal was something we all struggled with. Emily and I made a conscious decision to shield the kids from the full truth of what had happened, but as they grew older, we knew there would be more questions to answer. For now, we focused on creating a stable and loving environment for them. Work became a sanctuary for me. I poured my energy into my projects, finding solace in the structure and predictability it offered. My colleagues, who had been understanding and supportive, provided a sense of normalcy that was deeply comforting. Emily, too, threw herself into her work as an interior designer, finding creative outlets that helped her process her emotions. Our relationship slowly began to evolve. We were no longer the same couple we had been before the affair, but we were forging a new connection, one built on hard-earned honesty and a deeper understanding of each other's flaws and vulnerabilities. The intimacy we were rebuilding was different, more mature and grounded in reality, rather than the idealized version of love we had once believed in. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the kids play in the yard, Emily turned to me, her expression serious. "Michael, I've been thinking a lot about us. about what we've been through and where we're headed. I looked at her, sensing the gravity of her words. What are you thinking? I know we've come a long way, but there's still so much work to be done. I want to make sure we're both committed to this journey, not just for the kids, but for ourselves. I want to know that we're both willing to keep fighting for this, no matter how hard it gets. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. I am, Emily. This isn't easy, and there are days when the pain feels overwhelming. But I believe in what we're building. I believe in us. She reached out and took my hand, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and determination. I believe in us too, Michael, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. The next few months were a testament to our commitment. We continued to attend therapy, both individually and as a couple. We learned to communicate more openly, addressing issues before they could fester and become larger problems. We made a conscious effort to prioritize our relationship, finding time for each other amidst the chaos of everyday life. One of the pivotal moments in our healing journey came during a weekend retreat organized by Dr. Collins. It was designed for couples who had experienced significant marital issues and provided an intensive environment for healing and rebuilding. The retreat was emotionally exhausting, but it forced us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities. During one of the sessions, we were asked to write letters to each other, expressing our feelings without holding back. Emily's letter was filled with remorse, love, and a deep desire to make amends. My letter was a mix of anger, sadness, and a cautious hope for the future. Reading each other's words was a cathartic experience, and it brought us closer in a way that was both painful and beautiful. By the end of the retreat, we felt a renewed sense of purpose. We knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but we had the tools and the commitment to face it together. We left the retreat with a plan to continue our therapy, both as a couple and individually, and to keep working on our communication and trust. Back home, life slowly began to settle into a new normal. Emily and I found a balance between our roles as parents and as partners. We made time for date nights, rediscovering the joy of each other's company. We took up new hobbies together, like hiking and cooking, finding shared interests that brought us closer. The kids flourished in the stable environment we were creating. Olivia, now 8, was thriving in school and had become more outgoing. Ethan, 5, was full of energy and curiosity, always eager to explore the world around him. Seeing their happiness reinforced our resolve to keep working on our relationship. One evening, as we were tucking the kids into bed, Olivia looked up at us with a thoughtful expression. "Are you and Mommy happy again?" she asked, her innocent question cutting straight to the heart. Emily and I exchanged a glance, and I smiled at her. "We're working on it, sweetheart, and we're very happy to have you and Ethan." She seemed satisfied with that answer and hugged us both tightly. "I love you, Daddy. I love you, Mommy." "We love you too," Emily said, her voice choked with emotion. As we left their room, Emily turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I nodded, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes, Emily, we are." The journey to rebuild our relationship was far from over, but we had made significant strides. The wounds of betrayal would always be there, but they were healing, slowly but surely. And in their place, we were creating a new foundation, one built on honesty, commitment, and a deep, abiding love that had been tested but not broken. Life was beginning to feel hopeful again, and as I looked at Emily, I realized that we had the strength to overcome anything, as long as we faced it together. The future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape, and I was determined to make the most of it. We had resolved the immediate problems, but the journey of healing and growth was ongoing. Every day was a choice to keep fighting for our family, for our love, and for the future we were building. And with each passing day, the path ahead became a little clearer, a little brighter, and filled with the promise of new beginnings. The months that followed were a testament to the power of resilience and commitment. Emily and I had navigated the stormy seas of betrayal and found ourselves in calmer waters. The journey had been arduous, filled with moments of doubt and pain, but it had also been transformative. We emerged stronger, more connected, and with a deeper understanding of each other. Our new life was not about forgetting the past, but about building a future that acknowledged it and grew from it. We continued our therapy sessions, and they became a cornerstone of our relationship. Dr. Collins often reminded us that healing was a continuous process, and we took his words to heart. We learned to communicate more effectively, to listen without judgment, and to support each other unconditionally. Emily's remorse and commitment were unwavering. She worked tirelessly to rebuild my trust, and her transparency was complete. She shared every detail of her day, reassured me when insecurities arose, and consistently demonstrated her dedication to our family. Over time, the walls I had built around my heart began to crumble, and I found myself opening up to her again. One of the most significant changes was the way we prioritized our relationship. We made time for each other, not just as parents, but as partners. Date nights became a regular occurrence, and we rediscovered the joy of simply being together. Whether it was a quiet dinner at home, a hike in the mountains, or a weekend getaway, these moments were precious and helped rekindle the love we had thought lost. We also embraced new activities and hobbies together. Cooking became a shared passion, and we often spent evenings experimenting with new recipes in the kitchen. We took up hiking, exploring the beautiful trails near our home, finding solace in nature and the time spent together. These shared experiences created new memories and strengthened our bond. Our children thrived in the stable and loving environment we were creating. Olivia, now 8, was blossoming into a confident and curious young girl. She excelled in school, made new friends, and embraced every opportunity to learn and grow. Ethan, 5, was full of energy and enthusiasm, always eager to explore and discover the world around him. Seeing their happiness was a constant reminder of why we were fighting so hard to rebuild our family. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Michael, I've been thinking a lot about our journey. We've come so far, and I feel like we're finally in a good place. But I know there's still more we can do to strengthen our relationship." I looked at her, sensing the sincerity in her words. "What do you have in mind?" "I've been reading about couples who renew their vows as a way to reaffirm their commitment to each other," she said. "I think it could be a powerful way for us to acknowledge the past and celebrate the future we're building together." The idea resonated with me, and I nodded. "I think that's a beautiful idea, Emily. Let's do it." We began planning a small, intimate ceremony to renew our vows. We decided to keep it simple, inviting only our closest friends and family. The ceremony would take place in our backyard, a place that had seen both our darkest moments and our steps toward healing. It felt fitting to mark this new chapter in the same place where our journey had begun. The day of the vow renewal was filled with a sense of hope and renewal. The backyard was adorned with twinkling lights and fresh flowers, creating a magical atmosphere. Olivia and Ethan were excited, dressed in their best clothes and eager to be part of the special day. Our friends and family gathered, their support and love evident in their smiles and warm embraces. As Emily and I stood before our loved ones, I felt a sense of peace and gratitude wash over me. We had been through hell and back, but we had emerged stronger and more united. The words we spoke to each other were not just vows, but promises. Promises to love, to cherish, and to stand by each other through every challenge life might throw our way. "I vow to love you, to trust you, and to walk beside you through all of life's journeys," Emily said, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "I vow to be your partner, your confidant, and your best friend now and always." My heart swelled with emotion as I looked into her eyes. "I vow to love you, to support you, and to cherish every moment we share," I said. "I vow to be your rock, your refuge, and your greatest champion. Together, we can overcome anything." As we exchanged rings and sealed our vows with a kiss, I felt a profound sense of closure and new beginnings. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined us. We had chosen to rise above it, to rebuild, and to create a new life together. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a comforting routine. We continued to nurture our relationship, finding joy in the everyday moments and celebrating the milestones we achieved together. We were a team, stronger and more resilient than ever. Our new life was not without challenges, but we faced them with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. The scars of betrayal were a part of our story, but they were not the end of it. They were a testament to our strength and our commitment to each other. As I looked at Emily, the woman who had been my greatest love and my greatest pain, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We had been through the fire and emerged tempered, our love forged in the crucible of adversity. Our journey was far from over, but we faced the future with hope and determination. The new life we were building was one of honesty, trust, and unwavering commitment. It was a life filled with love, laughter, and the promise of many more beautiful moments to come. And as we stood hand in hand, watching our children play, I knew that we had found our way back to each other and that our love was stronger than ever.